All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. As you know, I have been working for a number of years to try to improve access to surety credit for small business by trying to streamline data and try to implement data interoperability. It turned out to be a simple project to help small business has ballooned up into the realization that data touches just about everything we do, and the efficiencies that I was seeking to do for small business applies to the largest utility scale project. What has happened recently is the DOE has issued a program called the Orange Button, which now seeks to provide a platform for our nation to come together and develop a consensus on data standards and data interoperability as a way to make solar more bankable by basically helping to reduce the risk on the projects and to increase the underwriting capabilities of underwriting financial products, whether it be bank, lending, insurance. So we're part of that group. I've been asked by the one group that won the strategy side, SGIP, to chair the finance group or vice chair of the finance group. And on the SunSpec, which has the difficult task of implementing what we try to come up with, I've been asked to lead the surety group. And what we have been recommending is that we try to focus in on what data we can pick as a use case that is very simple, very defined, and allows the highest amount of impact with the least amount of confusion. And so one of the data sets that I thought was the most valuable was something that Matthias and the working group at IEC has been working on called 61724. And this is just simply a solar system performance data set. And what is important about this is that when we try to write financial products on how solar systems are performing, it's obvious that being able to know how it's performing is good. But the problem is there's no one standard for how a solar system performs. So when we try to get a relationship, let's say with a PG&E, who I'm very glad attended today, they have performance measurements as well. And if I'm going to write a financial product that guarantees a financial performance, we need to be on the same page for what that measurement is and what that quantifying is. So the Orange Button is trying to do that. And when you look at data, it's like a sword. You know, it's a double-edged sword. On the top edge of the sword is going to be the data itself. It creates incredible efficiencies, and when people all agree on the same data set and work together, all of us will benefit from that significantly. Well, in the underbelly of that sword, is in a two-edged sword, is the cyber risk that we all face. And the challenges we face as we start talking about exchanging data between business partners, particularly on a portfolio level. How do we do that safely and securely? So I'm very pleased to introduce some of my people that have offered to come up and just do a panel so that the people that were working on the Orange Button and are working collaboratively to try to solve this have a chance to kind of just have an informal panel discussion. So Al Barkley, with the President's Chairman, Vice Chairman.
I was acting chair. I was acting chair of the President's Infrastructure Advisory Council, which was a guy named Richard Clark's effort to wake the administration up to the cyber threat. And I got that because I was working for NASDAQ at the time, and we were a big target. And so I had the opportunity to dive into the way that the policy, sort of the friction layer between policy and getting things done on cyber was interesting.
So his background is heavy in the government for how the data and the data came to be. So we are not starting something new. On the backside, as we talk about building the smart grid has been an intense focus of the U.S. government on protecting the smart grid from cyber. And I'll let General Alexander introduce himself and give a little background on what he's done there.
Nothing.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. General Keith Alexander, retired. I had 40 years in the Army. My last 8 years and 8 months was as the director of the National Security Agency and the first commander of U.S. Cyber Command. I'll tell you right up front because all of a sudden I know what springs into everybody's minds is, oh, I have a lot of questions. I will tell you it was the greatest honor and privilege to work with our intelligence community and the military in going after terrorist threats and solving cyber problems. And so I think what Dixon's doing here today, setting standards for the future, is where our nation needs to go with the Internet of Things and other parts. So I'll be talking about cybersecurity. After I got out of the government after 40 years, it's kind of interesting. They wanted wanted me to stay, and I was thinking of this Navy guy who stayed forever. And they said, well, you could be like him, and I thought, he died in that job.
Did it start with an R?
Yeah, I think ring over, and I thought, man, do I want to do that? And I thought, my wife looked at me like, are you crazy? And I said, just funny. I got up and started a cybersecurity company, and recently was invited to sit on the President's Commission on Cybersecurity. And it kind of dovetails with what Dixon's doing here. So my bottom line up front for everyone is we have to set standards. We have to have a way of communicating. The Internet of Things is going to force that. And this is a great start on how to do that. So it's an honor and privilege to be here, and I look forward to talking with all of you.
I always joke that I am unconstrained by reality because I just want things to do it. It just makes simple sense to me. The challenge is actually getting it done. And the person who's going to bear the burden on that, on the orange button, is Tim. And Tim, you introduce yourself and describe a little bit about your role with the orange button.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Dixon. Thanks for all the folks coming to see us this morning. I'm very lucky to be here this morning, and yeah, Dixon has been bothering me for 3 years on generating standards because he knew that that's what SunSpec was working on. SunSpec was founded in 2009 as IT meets distributed energy, and it was founded to actually make it easier to drive distributed energy assets with data and information model standards. So when Dixon met us, he said, you are the guys who need to take this to the next level. And well, that's what we've been trying to do for years. SunSpec has about 70 members, companies like Solar City, SunPower, First Solar, equipment suppliers like SMA, Tabuchi, most of the inverter companies, SolarEdge, and so forth, and then battery companies, and then companies building software on top of it. What are we trying to do? Make information models and standards so it's easy to exchange data and control. So we've been doing most of the Rule 21 smart inverter testing, first implementation for the state of California through grants. We have, as I said, about 70 members. Anyone here could be a member, and we invite you to join. If not directly, use our standards, which are available on our website, sunspec.org. So I was asked to join SunSpec a couple of years ago to help bring the financial community in. I was doing consulting for NREL on securitization of solar assets, because I spent 5 years doing structured finance and de-risking solar power projects. So I joined, and we've been working with folks like Wells Fargo and so forth. And last year, we didn't need much encouragement, but Dixon actually called us up and said, you guys, you're getting on this orange button thing. It wasn't called orange button, it was called solar bankability data, aren't you? And said, oh, yeah, we've been working like around the clock for a week on our proposal. I said, well, go for it. And we did. So what SunSpec rolled in this DOE project called Orange Button is to set up the taxonomy and the APIs, the application program interface, between all elements of the data set in and around distributed energy assets. And we'll have not only solar, but also storage, because we think that completes the picture. From origination of a plant to recycling, and from the financial, technical, and operations description, and the business and performance description of the plant. And we're not going to develop a lot of new standards. What we're going to do is codify and put together these things like Matthias Heinz from TÜV, Joe Cunningham, and others have been working on for years on these standards, and both members, by the way, of SunSpec, and actually pioneers in their own way. Matthias is working on a project called IUCRE that is actually standardized certification of plants, so that surety folks will know that they got a description of the plant. So everything about data, everything about moving the data back, because this will not only drive down cost, remove risk, and increase security, because it will be a self-consistent data set that then we can add cybersecurity validation and to it. So that's what SunSpec's doing. We invite you to join, and since I was lucky enough project, I was lucky enough to be invited here amongst all these leaders.
Yeah, and then lastly is, you know, I'm trying to herd cats, and one of the biggest challenges that everybody says is frankly the cost of getting something done. And also, it's very difficult because when anybody on the private side, and somebody like Wells Fargo tries to do something, it's proprietary, and that makes it very challenging. So one of the things we've been working hard on, and I've been advocating for, is for all of us to really use our incredible resource in our universities as a neutral platform, as an educational experience, and to work with the universities as they look to educate themselves on how systems work and what data analytics might look like. And so, in that regard, I've asked Jerry Height from California State University, Chico, to come down. Jerry, if you introduce yourself.
Yeah, happy to be here, and happy to be sitting amongst this esteemed panel. I certainly don't hold any street cred like they hold. This is a perfect project for Chico State to be involved with. I've been involved with Dixon since 2004 on this thing. It's applied, it's not theoretical, it's in our wheelhouse, it's what we do best. We also see our role as a dissemination point. We have the largest construction management program in the state of California. We have a very active mechatronic and mechanical engineering program that's heavily involved in solar applications, applied research, efficiency, optimization kinds of issues. And connecting these data sets is a great project to join our computer science expertise. For 2 decades, we had the largest computer science program in the state of California as well. So again, there's a lot of touch points that this project brings to bear. Just by way of background, I'm the former assistant dean of both the business college and the engineering college at Chico State. I'm a 30-year guy there, so I've seen the landscape for a long time. Again, this is a great thing for students to be involved in. It provides them, we're hoping that it provides them an economic compensation at, what they're capturing at Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever, but this is going to provide them with meaningful experiences that they can put on their resume. So from that context, it's a huge value add for us to be involved, and we thank Dixon as an alum for bringing this to us way back when.
Could I add something, Dixon, just because I think it's important. I'm a cybersecurity government guy, but I had a chance yesterday to hear a brief by former Vice President Al Gore on renewable energy. And we're at a critical point from climate control, the world is. And if things kept going like they were by the end of this century, most of the species that we know today, including us, would be wiped out. And so it's at epidemic proportions. And when you hear what he has to say, one of the key things is how do we get renewable energies like solar power going? And the answer is it's so hard for small businesses and others to do this for all the reasons that Dixon and Al put on the table. But as a concerned person for our world, outside of cybersecurity, we've got to help make this go. So I think there's 2 key things that I would offer in this. First, my gratitude that Wells Fargo is leading it. And 2, I think you have an ally for helping to champion this in the former Vice President. And what I would do is kind of push that to him on your behalf and say, I think if you really want to get people working this at the small business level, let's help make it efficient so that they can afford to do it. And that's what this is all about. And, as I look at it, when you look at what Chile is doing, I think it was Chile, he has this great chart, and it shows Chile is doubling in the amount of megawatts it's doing. It went from 200 megawatts to 400 to this year to 400 times that, or some unbelievable amount that Chile is doing because of climate concerns. We've got to educate people on renewable energy. We've got to help make it attainable. We've got to bring all that together. And I think what you're doing here can actually pioneer that, and you can get great support in those groups that I think will help push this over the edge. So, I think for those of you that are here, I think this is hugely important for the future of where we are. That's not on the cybersecurity side. Of course, cybersecurity is absolutely vital But it's, you know, for the good of the nation, for the good of the world, we ought to work this together, and I'm glad that we have folks from around the world helping on this. Just a political announcement.
That's right.
I'll tie that up with some cybersecurity, because I got my start in cybersecurity on cell phones, because I was working for Intel, and I was funding small companies, building systems, completion, verification, validation, who am I talking to, et cetera. A lot of services are shipped out over these smartphones, and these billing systems have to complete the billing transactions, et cetera. And we've got a vision for this smart energy, be it in a small business, in a home, in a large business or a utility, that those assets are underutilized. Because right now, we only have dumb energy. We have dumb power plants that ship power out, and little tiny dumb power plants with people's houses. So those ship kilowatt hours out, and the only smart thing you can do with them is shut them off. And even if you're a large 100 megawatt PG&E power plant, feeding a PG&E net, the PPA is a power producer, the only smartness those large power plants have is PG&E calls them up and says, we don't need your energy, shut off. That's all the smartness they have right now. They don't support the grid. The grid continues to be done in one way. And SunSpec's been working for the last 3 years on not only data set, but also communications and control, so that we can, what I call Uberize those assets. So your home or your small business then can not only ship kilowatt hours, usually when they're not needed, but actually ship them when they are needed after hours with a very relatively small battery, and support the grid so it doesn't need to be upgraded, so for both lower frequency and so forth, and actually make our grid more resilient instead of less resilient. Again, to do that, we need data sets and security, and literally something simpler than this device could go in every home's energy system and do megawatts and watts and other services that would strengthen our grid and allow us to have more resiliency and less pollution and more green. But to do that, we need security and data standards, and that's what we're working on. And then we can Uberize the asset, and your home power plant can actually be a moneymaker for you. It's a money saver.
And I would add that while this all sounds very futuristic, actually this is a long-standing project that's been going on for a considerable amount of time. And I think that's what I wanted to convey today, and which is why I asked Al to come, because I'd like you to give us a background on what is the foundation for data interoperability and XBRL.
I think I'll stand up so I can see everybody, if that's all right. Let me give you a little bit of background on how I got involved in this and what's been going on. First of all, as you know, when XML came in as one of the basic technologies of the internet, it was a major step forward. There was a fellow in Seattle who said, you know, this is a brilliant invention, but it's so flexible, it's so easy to change, so easy to make extensions to, that we need to come up with a structured version of it. So extensible business reporting language was born in one person's mind about 20 years ago. I was working at the NASDAQ stock market. I was president, and I was sitting in my office, and my secretary walked in and said, the chairman of the SEC's on the phone. Well, I always had mixed emotions about getting a call from the chairman of the SEC. It was Chris Cox. He'd just moved over from the Congress. I knew him pretty well anyway, and I like him a lot, so I picked up the phone and was asked to come over and meet with him and his staff. And they said, we understand that you've been working on a project to understand extensible business reporting language. Well, what had happened is Microsoft, in the person of Bill Gates, had recognized the power of this Seattle-based accountant's ideas and had come to want to demonstrate it in the Office suite of products as a way of moving data into the Office suites and moving data around in an ecosystem. So a man named Mike Willis came to me. He was a partner at Price Waterhouse, and he had come to understand the power of standardizing XML and defining vocabularies. And we put up a small demonstration on the NASDAQ website using Microsoft technicians to do the development, using Pricewaterhouse to define the data and be sure all the accounting was right. We put up 20 companies. I called George Scalise, who was running the Semiconductor Industry Association at the time, and said, I didn't need to ask his permission because it was all public data, but I wanted their support. So I said, could I put up 3 years of data for 20 semiconductor companies? And in addition, Cisco heard about it and wanted to play, and Microsoft obviously wanted to play, and Intel sort of led the way. And so we put this demo up, and that's what Chairman Cox had heard about from one of his staffers. And he said, do you think you could do that for the Edgar system? Is there anybody here who doesn't know what the Edgar system is? It's a huge database that all public companies report into, all mutual funds report into. And it was basically a bunch of PDF files. And it was pretty modern for its day, 30 years ago. And you could pull up a screen with a document on it and transcribe it yourself into the spreadsheet or Word document you wanted. We wanted to make that flow, and we demonstrated with these 20 semiconductor companies that you could do that. So Chairman Cox said, I want you to volunteer to do this. Pro bono. And I said, in my only defensive comment was, well, how big a project do you think this is? And he said, well, my staff thinks that there are about 5,000 data fields that will define US GAAP. Well, you can almost get 5,000 data fields in an Excel spreadsheet. So I said, I can do that. We'll organize it. Well, to tell you what's happened, we're at 19,000 and counting. The SEC had no clue how complicated it had made the accounting, but we were eager to make it all work. And there was a organization set up. Barry Melanson, who runs the AICPA, had really been shepherding the XBRL movement ahead of time. And the SEC, interestingly enough, was because of the Enron and some of the other accounting issues that were going on at the time, did not particularly want the accounting profession to be seen as the promoter of XBRL at the time. And so we set up a separate, or Barry had actually set up a separate nonprofit that could receive SEC grants. And we began with a lot of help from the accounting industry to engage in what became, it's been about a 10-year process to be able to make that system really work. I was honored to be chairman of that effort. A fellow named Mark Bolgiano and a fellow named Campbell Pride and Michelle Savage, who lives out here, among others, have been the real promoters of this. Well, let me tell you a little bit how this fits in the context of the world. Right now, and I'll pass this map around, there are about 50 companies using XBRL, countries. There are over 100 agencies. There are about 10 million filing companies. There are 50 central banks and financial regulators requiring reporting in XBRL. There are 30 stock exchanges requiring reporting. And there are about 30 taxing agencies. And I'll just pass this around, and you all are welcome to look at it. It's very interesting that in our wonderful democracy in the United States, it's hard for us to adopt new things. It's hard to have things change at the government level because we've got all this contention among vested interest in the status quo. The first federal agency to really use XBRL was the control of the currency and the monthly call reports that banks put in. Wells Fargo has to put in its monthly call reports. Every other bank does. The controller of the currency will tell you that the XBRL automation has taken the processing down from about 2 months to about 2 hours. And it made it a much more efficient way to look at things. I think they have a whole review cycle of just a couple days. So they're able to do that. When Dixon came to me and said that he was interested in getting XBRL, the standardization of XBRL, into the surety industry and therefore the construction industry, I said I'd be glad to try to be helpful with that. And the reason is that I really came to understand the power of standardization. You know, we don't think about how economically advantaged we are to be able to plug something into the wall and get electricity out and use it in a million different ways from that one standard interface with the electric utility industry. There are other standard interfaces, grounded plugs, 220 plugs, European plugs. We haven't standardized around the world yet, but we've got an enormous advantage economically in a large market of having a standard. The other really classic example is railroad gauges. Real economic growth started in this country when the railroad gauges began to be standardized. What we're doing with XBRL is adding another layer, if you're familiar with this, the OSI stack in computing, where you've got chips and then you've got operating systems, and link layer and operating systems and transport layer, all up to the graphic user interfaces. What we're doing is we're adding another layer of standardization, and you'll get all the same benefits of that standardization economically. The problem is a problem of the commons. The problem is who goes first, because there is a front-end expense, and there's no, to use the fax machine analogy, I don't want to buy the first fax machine. I want to buy the 2 millionth or the 20 millionth or the 200 millionth. And so it's this getting this flywheel started that's so interesting. And it's an appropriate role for government, but it's also an appropriate role for the corporate leaders in each industry. And because the language is being standardized and the ancient biblical Tower of Babel problem is being tackled, it's really difficult to get people to say, well, why should I do that? But we're seeing the value of it, and we're so far behind in the United States when we find out every company, public and private, in the UK reports this way. The Netherlands run their entire government on the basis of standardized XBRL languages over and over again. So my point here is to give you a little bit of feeling for the background. This is not that new. It's being done. It's being done in far more advanced ways than other parts of the world. And we have the benefits of this staring us in the face if we can get our act together to get it going.
Thank you, Don. So going back to trying to standardize and talking about the performance on a solar system, inevitably what's happening now is panels are getting more and more technologically efficient. Panels themselves will have chips in them that'll tell how that panel is performing. And that data streams up and aggregates up into a portfolio of how the whole solar system is going, and ultimately that data can go from the panel where it originates into Wells Fargo, where we are analyzing system performance as part of our financial guarantees. As I sort of laughed with General Alexander, what could go wrong with a, say, Chinese embedded chip being the source of data that could be coming into the U.S. banking system? Now, I know that the smart grid has been under heavy scrutiny for cyber protection, and so, General, if you would touch base a little bit on what the nation has been doing in protecting our smart grid.
Can you all see me? It's okay, because I know that in the back, Darius has already seen me, said I was ugly, so please sit down. I'm going to talk to you about a few things here. I'm going to start at the top level. I want to cover a little bit on technology, a little bit on the threat, and talk about the way forward. I also want to hit a little bit on security and privacy, because my former job, I can read minds now, as you may know. I have a chip embedded, and I know there are questions about NSA and where does funds leak. So I do want to give you some of that, because I think you'll find it really informative on what we're trying to accomplish here. So up front, what is on the table is how do we become more efficient and help some of this happen that's good for the world. It's good for the small business because we can be much more efficient in getting approvals, we can track what's going on. I'm glad that PG&E is here. I think what you guys are doing will lead the energy market in this area, so thanks. When you look at what's going on technically, the amount of new information that's going to be created this year is more than the last 5,000 years combined. And part of that is all the information that's coming in from these new devices and information that's being stored. It's huge. The technical information, I'm glad that we have USF here and the former dean, because when you think about technology, it's doubling every 2 years. What that means is for students that are entering USF their freshman year, half of what they've learned by their junior year will be outdated. And when when you look at the amount of jobs that are out there, the top 10 in-demand jobs this year didn't exist 10 years ago. App developers for the iPhone. The iPhone was put out in 2007. For the Android, for the cloud, all these jobs, all new. That means we're teaching students in school on technology that doesn't exist, for jobs that haven't been created, to solve problems we don't even know are problems. That's how rapid this is going. And there's tremendous opportunities. We were talking briefly about cancer and cancer research. Watson was created initially as an AI system or a smart system, and they used it to go against Jeopardy, the best Jeopardy players in the world. And of course, Watson won. It was no contest. Now that's a good gimmick. It's kind of like, Deep Blue playing chess and all these things. But what they did a couple of years ago is they shifted Watson to go after one of the more lethal forms of brain cancer. And if you're diagnosed with that brain cancer, what happens is a panel of 5 doctors spend about 30 days looking at the chemotherapy and the radiation treatment that you need. 5 doctors, 30 days. And this metastasizes so quickly that keeping up with it has been very, very difficult. With Watson, they were able to go from 30 days down to 9 minutes. This huge shift in technology is going to help us solve things like cancer and all that for the future. And as Dixon noted, as we start to do that, tremendous threats to all the devices on the network. And if you think about from Estonia in 2007 being disrupted for a few weeks by Russian hackers, Georgia being attacked in 2008 as part of a physical attack on Georgia by Russian hackers, to 2012, largely credited to Iranian hackers going after Saudi Aramco and destroying the data on over 30,000 systems, and then 350, a little more, disruptive attacks on Wall Street, the financial sector. You saw 2014 Target, Home Depot, Sony, all these attacks, and they are growing. And so now we have this Internet of Things, and the number of devices, the number of iPhones, and the number of mobile phones today exceeds the number of people on the planet. I know this because I have 16 grandchildren, and one of them has 2 phones. That's a joke, I'm sorry. I will slow it down for you. I know it's early. But it does. It's 7.6 billion mobile phones out there. Think about that. Some of you have one for work, one for home. A lot of you do. And these devices are growing. And I'm often asked by congressional members, why don't we slow down? Outlaw the internet was one of the comments. I really had that said by somebody from California. I thought, you do not want to say that publicly, especially in Silicon Valley, because actually what we're doing here will change the world for good. And what we're talking about here with the orange button, with XBRL, bringing all this in, will change the world for good, but we got to solve some problems. And there's 2 sets of problems. How do you solve the problem for the Internet of Things, which this becomes a piece of it, the smart grid and all the things that are coming together? And how do we protect civil liberties and privacy? The big elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about when the former director of NSA is in here, which I appreciate, but we ought to put on the table. With the first, the good news is there is a path forward in cybersecurity. I think there's some great paths forward. There are some things that we have to break through. We have to get the cybersecurity community to present a comprehensive capability. In this regard, one of the things I told Dixon is, yeah, I'd absolutely like to come here because I am passionate about that as well. Solving the problem that's being put on the table for the smart grid, for the Internet of Things, is what we're all about. It's going to happen. Nothing is going to slow it down. The question is, can we provide the security for it using a more comprehensive system? And you see that coming out. And that deals with behavioral models, with a way of linking your firewalls, your end agent user devices, all your systems. And oh, by the way, what does it solve? It solves what Dixon was referring to on the smart grid, the Internet of Things. You've got to solve both. And we're partnering with GE and others to solved just that problem with their system called Predix, which I know you guys are familiar with, and now extending that into this whole area. I want to give you a couple war stories because I find these to be really helpful in understanding. You know, I was the director when Snowden. We have a name for him. We used to have a golf ball. To show this to Dixon, and on the golf ball was his name, Rat Bastard. It was given to me as my retirement thing, a set of those. In 2013, I was called down to the White House, and I'll tell you, when I got to NSA in 2005, I had no idea that my job would involve going to the White House 2 or 3 times a week. I had no idea. I thought as a military officer, you know, I deal to the DOD, maybe get to see the SecDef once every 6 months. Next thing I know, I come in, they say, oh, by the way, you're briefing the president on a topic you're not cleared for. And I thought, this is going to be one of the world's shortest briefings, because I'm going to say, I'm not cleared for what you're going to hear. Any questions? Because I don't know what the topic is. So I did get cleared. The vice president cleared me, and a couple days before, brief, and over the first 6 months, I was in the sick room probably 50 times. It was amazing. Fast forward to now with the Snowden thing, I get called down to the White House. We're going to set it up. I knew it was about the presidential review group, so I went around and said, who should we have on the presidential review group? We could get Colin Powell. We could get Condoleezza Rice. We can get all these luminaries to come in and see what we're doing. And so I go, and you know it's not going good when you come down and on the sit room table, it's a big table, and there's like 8 chairs on one side, 8 chairs on the other. The president has his chair up at the top of the table, and I'm sitting on this side. All the NSC folks are sitting on that side. You think, I took a shower. I think I'm okay. And they had 4 or 5 files in front of them. And the National Security Advisor she says, we're here to talk about the Presidential Review Group. I said, great, let's talk about it. She goes, I said, I'm all for it. I've got these great names. She goes, well, we've already decided who would be on the panel. And I said, but I have these ideas. I think my ideas are really good. You got to hear them. So the president's already made a decision. And so they slide these files across the table with their fingertips. And you know it's not good when they do that because they try to keep their hand back so you can't grab it. You know, as an Army guy, they think, okay, you could be a bad guy. And so I look at these files, you know, it's like Alf. I pick up the file, open up the first one, sorry, Alf. And I look at it, and I'm going to tell you what I said. I'm not proud of this. I read it, yada, 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 board member of the ACLU. And I looked up, I said, you got to be shitting me. These guys are suing us, and you're putting them on the guys to come and investigate and look at this? And they go, well, the president has made a decision. So I'm an Army officer, and I said, all right, roger that. So I go back up to NSA. The next morning, they're all in my advisory board room. It's a big room. It's a big desk. It's bigger than the SIP room. And we have a table bigger than the SIP room. You know, you got all the agencies got that one bigger than the SIP room. And he's sitting way back there. And his arms are like this. And I thought, wow, I'm pretty good at reading body language. And he's looking at me like, you know, and I looked at him somewhat askance. And I said, well, you know, so I thought, well, here's what we'll do. We're going to be 100% transparent. We'll give them everything that we've touched in those data sets. This was the metadata program and the email program. They will get to see every case that NSA touched, used in the data, what happened. 100% audit. Everything. And they were up there for over 5 weeks when they got to do that. And so I would read the first part, but I took all the senior people from NSA out of the room and let the young folks that ran it, the young folks like you who were running the program, they told them candidly what they did with the data, how they did it, how they shared it with the FBI, how they stopped terrorist attacks, what this was for. And so 5 weeks later, I come back into the room. And now the guy's body language has changed. And he comes walking around the table from, so you've got a little bit of distance, and my protection unit's not there, and I'm thinking, well, I'm in pretty good shape. I think I can take him. I'm all set. And he comes up and he grabs my hand. He starts, you know how some people shake your hand, really shake it like that? Well, that's what he shook my hand like that. And I thought, whoa, he's trying to take it out of the socket. And he goes, you and your people have the greatest integrity of any agency I've ever been to. have hit me with a wet fish and gotten a lower response. And so I said, well, don't tell me. Tell the American people, tell the White House, tell Congress, and tell the people of NSA. And he said, I'll do that. So I'm going to read you this because I think it's important for you to have this as we go forward. And then I'll tell you the guy's name, and then you can go. And so I had it sent to me because I forgot to bring my card. That's why I was using the iPhone. I am connected. To say I was skeptical of the NSA is in truth an understatement. I came away from my work on the review group with a view of NSA that I found quite surprising. Not only did I find that the NSA had helped to thwart numerous terrorist plots against the United States and its allies in the years since 9/11, quote caption, great partnership between NSA, CIA, FBI, and the military. Tremendous working thing. And I wish you could see what I saw. I'm putting that right. But I also found it is an organization that operates with a high degree of integrity and a deep commitment to the rule of law. Signed, Jeffrey Stone, Presidential Review Group member, acting dean at the University of Chicago Law School, and a board member of the ACLU. Now, what he did stunned the White House and everybody else, because he came out and he said, not only did we find that everybody at NSA was doing exactly what we asked them to do, not one person was found doing anything wrong, but they're actually doing what you, the White House, Congress, and the courts authorized and asked that they do, 100%. In over 18 months of investigation, not one person in over 30,000 was found doing anything wrong. Now, none of that makes the press. Well, the rest of the story. So that program, that metadata program, did you know, was reaffirmed by Congress last fall and is still running today. Now, there is a change in it. It now is at the service providers, but NSA still has the same access and it still goes. And the reason is Jeffrey Stone, the board member of the ACLU, sat down with me and he called me up and said, we need to write a joint op-ed. And I said, are you crazy? You're a board member of the ACLU. You're way off on the left side, and I'm an Army officer way over here on the right side. I said, why would you want to do that? And he said, it's the right thing for the nation. Here's why. If we don't have a program like this, and we get hit, we're not going to have civil liberties and privacy. The best thing we can do for civil liberties and privacy is to run programs that are done like this with oversight from the courts, from Congress, and from the administration. Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of our Constitution. So why do I bring all that up? As we look at what we're doing here today and trying to set the case forward and where we go, people are going to throw things out because they have parts of the truth. And what the American people need is the whole truth. And what we can help them do is to see what we're doing with the extensible business reporting language, what we're doing to secure it. It's good for our nation, and we can do this in a way that protects our civil liberties and privacy, ensures we get them the right amount of support, and helps our small businesses in a way that we haven't been able to do before. I have a bunch of war stories, and I know some of my former colleagues, you know, there's a lot of great things that our country does in these areas that we can't talk about or they'd shoot me. They told me that when I retired. Now, having said that, I think this starts with us here today. How do we get this going? How do we get this going? So for Wells Fargo, thanks for pushing this, because I think, you know, when you look at what our country needs, what the world needs, we need a way of helping to push some of this into there. And if we can do what Dixon and Al said about tracking and helping small businesses, getting the funding, having a language that does that, the top half of the sword, I believe we can handle the bottom half, the cybersecurity, and do it in a way that the American people would be proud and that would set the standards for the rest of the world. And you know, we're the nation that created the internet. We ought to be the first to secure it, and I think we can do that. And I think we're well on our way.
Yeah. So the purpose of this meeting, obviously, is to be informal and to allow interaction and questions. And so I can open it up if anybody has a question, or I'm happy to be a moderator. But does anybody have anything they'd like to ask, either the general or Al or Jerry or Tim?